to take you straight to
I thank
Manchester,
him
New
very much
Hampshire,
for
where
his
there you see
support and
Hillary
his
Clinton at
friendship.
a
Thank
town
you, Lou.
hall-style event. She
And
will be unveiling her
I
proposals
want
to
to
try to
thank
curb
Aaron
gun
and
violence,
Eleanor
a new set
for
of
being with
proposals
us.
on
And
gun control,
Aaron's
including,
story,
we understand, the potential of
unfortunately,
using
is way too
executive
common, isn't it?
actions. One of the things that she is
And
likely to
we're
talk about
here on the
are
campus of a
background checks,
wonderful
which are
community
required
college,
for
very
retailers at
much like the
stores. But
one
of
in
course, a
Oregon,
major point of contention
where
has
young
been
people
the
were
idea of having
going to
background checks
school, and some
at
not
gun
so young.
shows for gun
The
buyers
victims I
there,
read are
because
between
under
18
federal
and
law,
67.
those are not required,
People
nor are they
attending
required for people who
classes,
buy guns over the
improving their
internet. So we are
skills,
likely to hear her talk about
teaching,
that, as well as a
learning,
host of other
thinking about the
proposals.
future,
Let's go ahead and listen in.
which was so ended senselessly, tragically. On that very same day that those people were killed in Oregon, a 5-month-old baby strapped into her car seat in the back of a car was killed by a stray bullet in Cleveland. The third baby in just a few months to be murdered in Cleveland. Between 88 and 92 people a day are killed by guns in America. Last figures we have for a whole year is more than 33,000. It's the leading cause of death for young African American men, the second leading cause for young Hispanic men, the fourth leading cause for young white men. This epidemic of gun violence knows no boundaries, knows no limits of any kind. And when this happens, people are quick to say that they offer their thoughts and prayers. That's not enough. How many people have to die before we actually act? Before we come together as a nation? You know, on the Republican side, Mr. Trump was asked about it and said something like, things like that happen in the world. And Governor Bush said, yeah, stuff happens. No. That's an admission of defeat and surrender to a problem that is killing 33,000 Americans. It's time for us to say, wait a minute, we're better than this. Our country is better than this. And there are steps we can take that improve gun safety and further the prevention of violence by guns. And today, I am proposing what I consider to be common sense approaches. A majority of Americans support universal background checks. In fact, a majority of gun owners support universal background checks. We had a bipartisan bill that didn't make it through the Senate. But we need to go back and with all of our hearts, working not just in Washington, but from the grassroots up, demand that we have universal background checks. And we have to also close the loopholes. We've got what's called the gun show loophole, and we've got what's now being called the Charleston loophole. When the Brady bill was passed, which wasn't easy, as you recall, but it did pass, exceptions were made for gun shows, and then later it was extended to include online sales. And 40% of guns are sold. Gun shows, online sales. We need to close that loophole so that when we have a universal background check, it will cover everybody. And then another loophole is what happened when the young man who murdered the 9 people at Bible study in the church basement in Charleston applied for a gun. The loophole says if they don't get the background check done in 3 days, you can still go buy the gun. Turned out he had a criminal background. And you know how record keeping is. People were still searching through it, but at the end of 3 days, he goes and buys the gun. Because we don't yet have it automated enough, we don't yet have the information shared from all levels of government, and he got his gun and was determined to go and use it to kill 9 innocent people. We also must address the very serious problem of military-style weapons on our streets. And you know, people don't really have a chance. You know, lots of times when terrible murders like this take place, somebody will say, well, you know, if we only had more guns. You're walking to class. You're driving your baby around in a car seat. You're going to church. And somebody has an automatic weapon, or even worse, an assault weapon that is a military instrument of war, and you're somehow supposed to be able to stop that with your own gun? That has never made any sense. And so from my perspective, we have got to keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have them, domestic abusers, people with serious mental health problems. There's got to be a better tracking and record keeping. You know, I remember the terrible massacre at Virginia Tech. The shooter there had been involuntarily committed, and there was no record of it. And if there is information about people who are felons, who are suffering from serious mental illness, who are domestic abusers, we got to get that information into the record keeping so that the universal background checks will actually show you that here's somebody who shouldn't have it. Now, some people say to me, oh, well, does this really work? Well, I can tell you this. The best data that we have is that since the Brady Bill implemented background checks, more than 2.4 million people have been stopped from buying a gun, and over 1 million of those were felons. So they were records of those particular potential purchasers. And I want to work with all of you. I want to work with sensible gun safety advocates as well as gun owners. I want to work with people from the grassroots up all the way to Washington. Because how much longer will we just shrug? Oh my gosh, something else terrible happened, whether it's in your neighborhood, Aaron, or at a community college, or the murder of children in their classrooms. We're going to go to the town hall portion of this, but I want to ask one of the mothers from Sandy Hook, if you wouldn't mind, to just come join me for a minute. Because I want you to hear from her, because so many of the parents so many of the parents of these precious children who were murdered have taken the unimaginable grief that they have been bearing and have tried to be the voices that we need to hear. And I want you to introduce yourself and maybe talk about what you and other parents are trying to do to get the changes that are necessary.
Thank you so much. My name is Nicole Hockley. I'm the managing director at Sandy Hook Promise and also the mother of Dylan, who was 6 when he was killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School. gun violence prevention was nowhere on my radar before losing my son, and I wish it had been, and I wish I had done something long before, something that I thought could never hit my community hit me. As part of Sandy Hook Promise, we focus very much on gun safety legislation and the common sense practices that you're speaking of, so thank you so much for taking this on and speaking out. We also very much focus on what can we do to get ahead of the violence, get upstream of it, and help identify and intervene, help people learn how to know the signs of someone who's at risk and get help before they even get to the state of picking up a weapon to hurt someone else. I think it's a comprehensive solution that's needed between gun access and responsibility, as well as mental health and wellness, and working together with all the other organizations and all the other people, as well as yourself. I have absolute faith that we can deliver this solution and protect children across America.
Thank you. So, I think what you just heard really reinforces how nobody knows what might happen, because we haven't done what we need to do to try to make any of us, but particularly our children, safe. So that's what's behind the proposals that I'm making. They're not new. There's nothing, unique about them, other than the fact that I am so determined we're going to do everything we possibly can to get this done. And so I know there are a lot of people here. We have a big group from Moms Demand Action and some dads as well. And I want to commend them, because they are a grassroots organization that is really trying to bring these issues to the public attention. And we need more of that. I have said we need a movement that people really will be part of, no matter what other issue that is on your minds, that you care about. Our safety, the great hope that we can protect people who are going about their daily business should be at the top. And therefore, I'm really asking everybody, regardless of politics or partisanship or candidates or anything else, to think of the ways that each of us can do more to try to provide that measure of gun safety that will save lives and prevent violence. So let me start by asking people if you want to say something or you have a comment to make on this or any issue. I'd like to start with this issue, because I know there are people here specifically on this issue, and I want to be sure to hear from them. Former Congressman Dick Swett. Hi, how are you? Here, Dick.
It's wonderful to have you here, and it's always a pleasure to be with my good friends, the Clintons. I want to give everybody just a little bit of a background on our relationship with regard to guns. In 1994, I voted in favor of a crime bill that had in it an assault weapons ban for 17 assault weapons out of nearly 800 weapons that were on the street. I'm not looking for any attention, but I received a letter prior to that vote that I thought would be worth sharing with the people here. And I had shared it with Hillary earlier. It's a letter from Ronald Reagan, and it's dated May 5th, 1994, and it's written to Congressman Dick Swett. He writes, "Dear Dick," and here's a copy of the letter, so I'm reading off of his own handwriting. He writes, "Dear Dick, Fred Ryan told me of your conversation, and I know you are thinking very carefully about the pending assault weapons bill. As a longtime gun owner and supporter of the right to bear arms, I too have carefully thought about this issue. I am convinced that the limitations imposed in this bill are absolutely necessary. I know there is a heavy pressure on you to go the other way, but I strongly urge you to join me in supporting this bill. It must be passed. Sincerely, Ronald Reagan. I have watched Hillary and her husband Bill work with people from both sides of the aisle for nearly 30 years. She is someone who is going to solve this problem. She is going to be a leader who will make this problem ultimately go away. I have every confidence that as our president, Hillary, you will be able to tackle this problem that we began trying to tackle back in the 1990s. And I am so grateful for your leadership, and I look forward to supporting you in the upcoming elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, we have a lot to talk about, that is for sure. Yeah, this gentleman right there in the green shirt.
Thank you very much. We're all the way from Arizona. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and I live there now. And I'm a gun owner and a supporter of the Second Amendment, but I couldn't give you more credit in that we need to deal with the wrong people getting guns, and especially with mental illness. As you know, in Tucson we had a person who had all kinds of trouble, was able to buy a gun. As you said, in Virginia Tech. In Louisiana, that person had been committed. So from a gun owner, from a reddest of red states, and a person who owns guns, more power to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, the lady right here. Yes, here comes the microphone.
Thanks for picking on me. I have a question about the CDC and research that was cut off early in the 90s by the Republican Party. I think if you could bring that back, if we could convince legislatures to fund research into gun violence, what causes it, I think we're hitting a lot of marks with that, because we're getting mental health issues, we're getting what roles guns play, how quickly people can, off someone with a gun when they want to. And if we can just analyze that data, I think we'll be in a lot better place.
I agree with you. And what she's referring to is that the Centers for Disease Control, is responsible for looking at public health issues. If there's dirty water that's making people sick, we are expecting them to tell us what to do to prevent that. So they were researching gun violence and trying to figure out who is more likely to commit violence, what kinds of warning signs might there be, and for very sad reasons, basically, you're right that the Republicans stopped the research. But it even goes further than that. There is a law in Florida, and I want you to hear this because it was so shocking at first that I really didn't believe it. There's a law in Florida that makes it a felony for a pediatrician to talk with families about being sure they keep guns safely away from children. Literally, a doctor can go to jail in Florida. Now, if you're a pediatrician and you're running through your checklist, are you keeping the household poisons out of the way of your kids, especially if you have toddlers who are, exploring everything. Do you make sure your sharp knives are kept away, and are they high enough up so kids can't accidentally get them? It seems perfectly reasonable to me to say, hey, if you've got guns in the house, are you sure they're really secure? Because too many little kids get a hold of them. We read about it every week. And they kill themselves, they kill their little friends. I think it is the doctor's responsibility to try to work with the family so that the family can try to keep their babies safe. And if you're in Florida, you could go to jail. So I want to make the argument and work toward the result that, we can learn a lot more about what are the characteristics of people who should not have guns. As we were just hearing from the gentleman from Arizona, as we're learning more, certainly what we know about the killer from Sandy Hook, now the killer from Oregon, there probably were some comments, some actions that might have set off some alarms in people. But if we don't have the good information so that people can be better informed, how do we help them? And so I agree with you. No issue should be beyond study in America. I mean, that's like a denial of everything we believe in our country. And, going along with that, so far as I know, the gun industry and gun sellers are the only business in America that is totally free of liability for their behavior. Nobody else is given that immunity. And I mean, that just illustrates the extremism that has taken over this debate. I was really struck when Dick Sweat was reading the letter from Ronald Reagan, and the fact that, when Dick was facing a very hard choice, which many people believe cost him his seat in Congress because he voted for the crime bill, which contained the Brady bill, which led to the background checks, which led to more than 2 million people not getting guns who were felons or domestic abusers or otherwise ineligible. He paid a big price for that. And here is a letter from Ronald Reagan. In fact, when the NRA was on one of their, tirades and calling the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms enforcers, jackbooted thugs, President George H.W. Bush resigned as an NRA member and said, no, I'm not going to be associated with that. So, I mean, ideally, what I would love to see is gun owners, responsible gun owners, hunters, form a different organization and take back the Second Amendment from these extremists. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now, yes, this lady right there. Sure. Yeah. Here comes a microphone. So.
I'm so glad to see you, Mr. Clinton. And I know this is a big issue in the United States, but I'm from Afghanistan. I have more thinking about my country every day, more than 200, 300 people dying over there. I want to know what's your opinion after you become a president of the United States. What are you thinking about? You want to pull out all United States soldiers, or you thinking they're going to be stay there? For my opinion, we want them over there to stay there for Afghanistan for protection. And I want to know your opinion about that also too. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And first, I want to say how distressed I am by the bombing of the hospital in Kunduz. And I know that Defense Secretary Carter has said that there will be a full, thorough investigation to try to get to the bottom of that. But it's deeply regrettable. It came within the context of the Taliban taking back over a city in the north and the Afghan army, which has performed very bravely. This is not an army that runs away. This is an army that stands and fights, but they don't have the experience. They don't have a lot of the support that they need to be as successful as they are trying to be. I think that we have got to continue to work with the Afghan government and the Afghan military to support them. Because they are fighting. It's a different story in other parts of the world, but there in Afghanistan, people are fighting for the gains that have been made in the last, 13, 14 years. There still is a lot of conflict. There's still a lot of danger. The Taliban is not going away. We know that. But there has been so many positive developments. the number of girls and women in school, at work, studying in the United States, going home to try to help their country, businesses that are able to operate now, as opposed to being under the thumb of the Taliban and being forced to, basically pay tribute all the time to the Taliban. There have been a lot of advances in health. Afghanistan had the worst maternal mortality rate in the world, and thanks to help from not just the United States, but other countries working with Afghan doctors and nurses, mothers are surviving childbirth. Some of the things that are so basic that are now so much better in Afghanistan. So I don't know the specifics or what I will be facing in January of 2017, but Afghanistan is a country that has tried, and the people are really focused on getting beyond the violence and the extremism from the Taliban, and I don't think we should just walk away. So I will do what I can to help. Right, here comes the microphone.
My name is Jeannie, and I was born and brought up on Belmont Street right here in town. It is no longer the city I was raised in, and a lot of that is because of drugs and because of gun violence. But my question to you, Hillary, if I can call you that,
or you can call me Val.
or Val, is my question I'm so excited to ask you is, last week a reporter asked Dr. Ben Carson one question, and that question was, as President of the United States, what would you do in advance to assist the folks of a horrible event like Hurricane Joaquin? And he kept it very short and succinct, and his three-word answer was, I don't know. Along with that, as you said, last week, a reporter asked Jeb Bush what he thought about the tragedy in Oregon. And he kept it even shorter, as you said. And his response to that horrific tragedy was, stuff happens. I would like to know from you, like you to explain to this audience and to the nation, why those would not have been your responses, and why, as President of the United States, you are ready to lead from day one.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's take the natural disaster question first, because Hurricane Joaquin was on everyone's mind. Thankfully, it didn't hit as hard as they feared, although South Carolina is getting battered with terrible torrential rains. I think one of the most important decisions any new president has is who's going to run FEMA and who's going to be prepared to work with cities, states, and the national government to get prepared for incoming natural disasters, to get pre-positioned the equipment and the food and the experts that you're going to need to be able to help people. And I will take that very seriously, looking for someone who has real hands-on experience, not from a 30,000 feet flying over it, but who's been there, who has had to go in and figure out what to do to help people evacuate, what needed to be done to try to do as much as possible to help people save their homes but not stay in their homes. There's just a lot of hard-won wisdom, and because of climate change, we are seeing an increased number of weather events, all over the world, not just in our country. And we need a mapping project. Here I'll give you a perfect example of why I disagree so profoundly with the current Republicans. We already heard the letter from Ronald Reagan. I told you about President George H.W. Bush. But the current Republicans in the Congress are trying to cut dramatically the money the federal government puts into weather forecasting. And To me, that is so, what's that old saying, you know, penny wise, pound foolish. We've got to have the best possible weather forecasting, not only for agriculture and, you know, everyday occurrences, but also to get ahead of, you know, natural disasters and events like big storms. So I will.
We're listening to Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire. She's holding a town hall, and she's touched on a number of different topics, but the huge one was a focus on her gun control policy. She gave us some of the highlights, including closing a couple of loopholes in regards to background checks. Currently, if you buy a gun on the internet or at a gun show, you don't need a background check. She wants to change that. She also wants to change another loophole. When you buy a gun at a store, if the background check takes longer than 3 days, you can still purchase that gun. She wants to close up that loophole as well.
Yeah, we also heard her, interestingly, call on responsible gun owners, in her words, hunters and so on, to form a different organization, she said, and, quote, take back the Second Amendment from these extremists, a reference, in her view, to people aligning with the NRA, the National Rifle Association.